At my grandson's graduation, my daughter stopped me from walking on stage. "You didn't contribute anything, Mom." She didn't know the dean had something prepared, and that the tribute carried my name. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. The auditorium was packed with proud families, their cameras flashing as graduates walked across the stage. I sat in the third row, my hands trembling slightly as I clutched my purse, watching my grandson Tommy receive his diploma. At 63, I had dreamed of this moment for years. But what happened next shattered every expectation I had about this day. "Mom, what are you doing?" Lily's voice cut through the applause like a knife. I had started to stand as families were invited to join their graduates on stage for photos. Other grandparents were already making their way forward, their faces glowing with pride. "I'm going to congratulate Tommy," I said quietly, smoothing down my best dress, the navy blue one I had saved for special occasions. It wasn't expensive, but it was clean and pressed. Lily's manicured hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, her perfectly painted nails digging into my skin. "Sit down," she hissed, her voice low but venomous. "You're not going up there." I blinked, confused. Around us, other families were celebrating, hugging their graduates, taking pictures. "But honey, I'm his grandmother. I've been there for him since he was born." "You haven't contributed anything to his education," Lily said, her voice rising just enough that the family sitting behind us could hear. "You never paid for his tutoring, his books, his supplies. You've just been there. Like furniture." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the heat rush to my cheeks as I noticed people starting to stare. Mrs. Patterson from down the street was looking at us with obvious curiosity. The Johnsons, who lived next to Lily, were whispering behind their programs. "Lily, please," I whispered, my throat tight. "I've helped however I could." She laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Helped? Mom, you work at the grocery store. You live in that tiny apartment. What could you possibly have contributed to Tommy's education at one of the most expensive prep schools in the state?" I wanted to tell her. The words burned in my throat, begging to come out. But I had promised myself years ago that I would never burden my grandson with the truth about how his education was really paid for. Some sacrifices were meant to stay silent. "I love him," I said instead, my voice barely audible over the crowd noise. "Love doesn't pay tuition bills," Lily snapped. "Now sit down and stop embarrassing us." I sank back into my seat, my legs feeling weak. Around me, joyful families continued their celebrations, but I felt completely alone. I watched as Lily strutted toward the stage in her designer heels and expensive suit, her husband Richard right behind her with his camera ready. They looked perfect, the successful couple with their graduate son. Tommy was scanning the crowd, and when his eyes found mine, he waved. I managed to smile and waved back, but my heart was breaking. He had no idea what had just happened. He had no idea about so many things. As I sat there, surrounded by strangers celebrating, my mind drifted back to all those years ago. Tommy was just 5 when I first started my secret. Lily had divorced her first husband and was struggling to make ends meet. She had dreams of marrying well, of giving Tommy a better life, but she needed help. I remember the day she came to my apartment, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I can't do this alone. I need to go back to school, get my degree, find a good man. But I can't work and study and take care of Tommy." So I took him. For 3 years, while Lily finished her education and eventually met Richard, I raised Tommy. I worked 3 jobs, early mornings at the bakery, afternoons at the grocery store, and evenings cleaning offices. I was exhausted constantly, but Tommy was worth it. When Lily married Richard and they moved to their big house in the suburbs, I thought things would get easier. But somehow, I became less important in Tommy's life, not more. Lily seemed embarrassed by my simple lifestyle, my small apartment, my ordinary job. "Mom works at the store," she would tell people as if it was something shameful. She never mentioned that I had given up my own dreams to raise her child while she built her new life. The ceremony was ending now, and families were gathering for the reception. I watched Lily pose for pictures with Tommy and Richard, their smiles perfect for the camera. No one called for me to join them. I stood up slowly, my knees aching. I was getting older, and the years of hard work were showing in my body. As I made my way toward the exit, I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Mrs. Crawford?" It was Dr. Martinez, the school principal. I was hoping to speak with you. I turned surprised. In all of Tommy's years at this school, I had never had a conversation with any of the administrators. Lily handled all the school meetings, all the communications. I wanted to thank you, Dr. Martinez continued, his voice warm, for everything you've done for Tommy. He's told me so much about you over the years. My eyes filled with tears. At least my grandson still thought of me fondly, even if his mother saw me as an embarrassment. He's a good boy, I managed to say. He is. And tomorrow at the special honors ceremony, I hope you'll be able to join us. There's something very important we need to discuss with you. I frowned. I don't think Lily mentioned any honors ceremony. Dr. Martinez looked puzzled. Really? But surely she told you about the recognition ceremony? It's specifically for you, Mrs. Crawford. Before I could ask what he meant, Tommy appeared at my side, still wearing his graduation cap and gown. Grandma Joan. He hugged me tightly, and for a moment, everything felt right again. I'm so glad you were here today. I wouldn't have missed it for the world, I said, meaning every word. Are you coming to dinner with us? Mom said she wasn't sure if you could make it. I glanced over at Lily, who was pointedly not looking in our direction. She hadn't invited me to any dinner. She probably hoped I would just disappear quietly, the way I always did. I think your mom has plans with your father's family, I said gently. But maybe we can have lunch together next week? Tommy's face fell slightly, but he nodded. I'd like that, Grandma. As I walked to my car, I could hear Lily's laughter carrying across the parking lot. She was probably telling someone about my embarrassing attempt to join the stage photos. The story would get funnier each time she told it. I sat in my old Honda Civic for a long time before starting the engine. 20 years of this. 20 years of being treated like I was nothing, like my love and sacrifice meant nothing. But Dr. Martinez had mentioned a recognition ceremony. Something specifically for me. I had no idea what that could mean, but for the first time in years, I felt a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. Tomorrow would bring answers. And somehow I had the feeling that everything was about to change. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Dr. Martinez's words about some kind of recognition ceremony. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my small kitchen, surrounded by memories that Lily preferred to forget. The photo album was tucked away in my bedroom closet, behind the winter coats I rarely needed in our mild climate. I hadn't looked at it in months, but tonight felt different. Tonight, I needed to remember why I had made the choices I did. The first picture showed Tommy as a baby, barely 6 months old, sleeping in my arms. Lily had been so young then, just 17 when she got pregnant. The father disappeared the moment he heard the news, leaving her scared and alone. I remember the night she called me, sobbing, "Mom, I don't know what to do. I can't raise a baby by myself. I'm just a kid." "You won't be alone," I had told her. "We'll figure this out together." But together quickly became me doing most of the work while Lily tried to finish high school, and then later pursue her dreams of college. I turned the page and found pictures of Tommy's first steps, taken in my tiny living room. His first birthday party, just him and me and a grocery store cake. His first day of kindergarten with me walking him to school because Lily was in class. For 5 years I was essentially Tommy's mother while Lily built her life. I didn't mind. I loved that little boy with everything I had, but it meant sacrifices that Lily never fully understood. I had been working as a substitute teacher when Tommy was born, something I enjoyed and was good at. But substitute work didn't pay enough to support 2 people, let alone 3. So I took on additional jobs. The bakery job started at 4 in the morning, mixing dough and preparing pastries. I would come home, get Tommy ready for daycare, then head to my afternoon shift at Henderson's Grocery. The evening office cleaning job was the hardest. After Tommy went to bed, I would drive across town to clean law offices and medical practices. I usually didn't get home until midnight, only to start again at 4 the next morning. Lily was in college then, studying business administration. She had big dreams and even bigger ambitions. "I'm going to marry someone successful," she used to tell me. "Tommy and I deserve better than this." I never pointed out that this was the result of my hard work, my sacrifice. I just smiled and encouraged her dreams. The turning point came when Tommy was 8 and Lily met Richard at a charity gala She attended as someone's plus one. Richard was everything Lily had hoped for: wealthy, established, looking for a wife to complete his perfect life image. "He doesn't know about my background," Lily confided to me one evening. "I told him my father died when I was young and that you worked in education. That last part was technically true, I suppose. I had been a substitute teacher. But Lily had painted a picture of a very different life than the reality we had lived. Mom, when you meet Richard, please don't mention the cleaning jobs or the bakery. Just talk about the teaching." I agreed, of course. I wanted Lily to be happy, to have the life she dreamed of. If that meant hiding parts of our story, I was willing to do that. The wedding was beautiful. Richard spared no expense, and Lily looked like a princess in her designer gown. I wore a simple dress from the department store sale rack, but I was proud to be there. Finally, my daughter would have the security she had always wanted. What I didn't expect was how quickly I would become an embarrassment to her new life. The first incident was at Tommy's 9th birthday party. Richard's parents were there, along with several families from their country club. I had brought a homemade cake, something I had always done for Tommy's birthdays. "Oh, you didn't need to bother, Mom," Lily said, quickly moving my cake to a side table. "We ordered something from the French bakery downtown." Later, I overheard her talking to Richard's mother. "Joan is very practical. She's not used to our lifestyle yet." Our lifestyle. As if she hadn't been living in my small apartment just 2 years earlier. Things got worse when Tommy started at the private school. Heritage Academy was one of the most prestigious schools in the state, with tuition that cost more than I made in 6 months. I assumed Richard was paying for it, and I was grateful. Tommy deserved the best education possible. But then I started noticing things. Lily seemed stressed about money, despite Richard's apparent wealth. She would make comments about the school fees, about how expensive everything was. One day when I was babysitting Tommy, I overheard a phone conversation. "I don't care what it costs," Lily was saying to someone. "Find a way to make it work. Tommy has to stay at Heritage." That night, I made a decision that would change everything, though no one would know about it for years. I had inherited my mother's house when she passed away 3 years earlier. It was a small place in an older neighborhood, but property values had gone up significantly. I had been renting it out, using the income to supplement my retirement savings. But Tommy's education was more important than my financial security. I sold the house quietly, without telling anyone. The proceeds were substantial enough to set up what I thought of as Tommy's education fund. Every month, I would send an anonymous donation to Heritage Academy, specifically designated for Tommy Crawford's tuition and expenses. The school was happy to accommodate the mysterious benefactor, who wanted to remain anonymous. They set up the account so that the family would receive billing statements showing scholarship adjustments, rather than payments from an unknown donor. Lily never questioned where the money came from. She seemed to assume that Richard's family was helping, or that the school had awarded Tommy some kind of merit scholarship. I let her believe whatever made her comfortable. For the next 8 years, I continued working my 3 jobs, sending every extra penny to that account. When Tommy needed tutoring, I paid for it anonymously. When the school offered special programs or trips, I made sure he could participate. I lived in my small apartment, shopped at thrift stores, and drove my old car while my grandson received the finest education money could buy. And through it all, Lily grew more and more ashamed of my simple lifestyle. "Mom, you really should let me take you shopping," she would say. "Richard's family notices these things." She meant my clothes, my car, my obvious lack of money. She had no idea that I was the reason Tommy could attend the same school as Richard's business partner's children. The irony was bitter. The more I sacrificed for Tommy's future, the more his mother looked down on me for being poor. I closed the photo album and returned it to its hiding place. Tomorrow, I would find out what Dr. Martinez wanted to discuss. Something about a recognition ceremony. Something specifically for me. After 18 years of anonymous giving, 18 years of silent sacrifice, I wondered if my secret was finally about to come to light. The thought both terrified and thrilled me. Lily had spent so many years treating me like I was nothing. Like I had contributed nothing to our family's success. Tomorrow she might finally learn the truth. I just hoped I was ready for whatever came next. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. Dr. Martinez had said the ceremony was at 10 o'clock, but I had no idea what to expect. I chose my clothes carefully, the same navy dress from yesterday, freshly pressed, and the small pearl earrings my mother had left me. When I arrived at Heritage Academy, the parking lot was nearly full again. I recognized many of the cars from yesterday's graduation, including Lily's silver BMW parked near the front entrance. My heart sank a little. I had hoped to speak with Dr. Martinez privately, whatever this was about. The auditorium was about half full, mostly families from yesterday's ceremony. I spotted Lily immediately. She was sitting in the front row with Richard and Tommy, her posture rigid with what I recognized as barely controlled irritation. She had probably been forced to attend something she considered beneath her notice. I slipped into a seat near the back, hoping to remain unnoticed. But as soon as Dr. Martinez spotted me, he smiled and gestured for me to come forward. "Mrs. Crawford, please, we have a seat reserved for you in the front." Every head in the auditorium turned to look at me. I felt my cheeks burn as I made my way down the aisle, acutely aware of my simple appearance compared to the designer clothes surrounding me. Lily's face was a mask of confusion and growing embarrassment. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she whispered as I sat down in the empty chair next to Tommy. "Dr. Martinez invited me," I whispered back. Lily's frown deepened. "For what?" "This is a donor recognition ceremony." My stomach dropped. A donor recognition ceremony. Surely there had been some mistake. I started to stand, ready to quietly leave, but Dr. Martinez was already at the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today for our annual Heritage Academy Benefactor Recognition Ceremony. Today, we celebrate the generous individuals whose contributions make excellence in education possible." He began calling names, and one by one, well-dressed couples and distinguished individuals walked to the stage to receive plaques and handshakes. The Weatherby family, who had donated the new science wing. The Johnsons, who funded the arts program. Richard's business partner, whose contribution supported the athletic department. I watched it all with growing confusion. Why was I here? There had obviously been some administrative error. "And now," Dr. Martinez continued, his voice taking on a different tone, "we come to our most special recognition of the day. For 18 years, Heritage Academy has been blessed by the generosity of an anonymous donor. This individual has contributed over $200,000 to ensure that one of our students could receive the finest education possible." My blood turned to ice. $200,000. That was almost exactly what I had calculated I had sent over the years. This donor never sought recognition, never asked for acknowledgement, and specifically requested that their identity remain secret. But today, with the graduation of the student they supported, they have agreed to let us publicly thank them. I could feel Lily's eyes on me, but I couldn't move. My hands were gripping the arms of my chair so tightly my knuckles were white. "Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in recognizing Mrs. Joan Crawford, whose 18 years of anonymous contributions have made Thomas Crawford's education at Heritage Academy possible." The applause started, but it sounded muffled and distant. I felt like I was underwater, drowning in the shocked silence from the chair next to me. I couldn't look at Lily. I couldn't move. "Mrs. Crawford?" Dr. Martinez was looking at me expectantly. "Would you please join me on stage?" Somehow my legs carried me forward. The walk to the stage felt like it took hours, though it was probably only seconds. Behind me, I could hear murmuring whispers, the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. Dr. Martinez shook my hand warmly and handed me a beautiful crystal plaque. I looked down at it, but the words were blurry through my tears. "Mrs. Crawford," he said into the microphone, "would you like to say a few words?" I looked out at the audience, finally allowing myself to meet Lily's eyes. Her face was chalk white, her mouth slightly open in shock. Richard looked confused, Tommy looked amazed, and scattered throughout the auditorium, people were whispering and pointing. I started, my voice barely audible. Dr. Martinez adjusted the microphone closer to me. "I never wanted recognition," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I just wanted my grandson to have every opportunity possible. Education is the greatest gift we can give our children." The applause was warmer this time, more genuine. But I kept my eyes on Tommy, who was staring at me with something like awe. "Tommy," I continued, "you've worked so hard and you've earned every achievement you've received here. I'm so proud of the young man you've become. As I walked back to my seat, the whispers grew louder. I caught fragments of conversations. $200,000. The grandmother who works at the grocery store. Anonymous for 18 years. I sat down, still clutching my plaque. Lily was staring straight ahead. Her jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle jumping. Richard kept glancing between us, clearly trying to process what he had just learned. Tommy reached over and took my hand. "Grandma," he whispered, "is that true? You paid for my school." I squeezed his hand. "Your education was the best investment I ever made." The ceremony continued around us, but I could feel the shift in the room's energy. People who had ignored me yesterday were now looking at me with respect, curiosity, even admiration. The woman in front of us turned around completely to stare. When Dr. Martinez announced the final recognition, Lily stood up abruptly. "We need to go," she said tersely to Richard. But as she started to move toward the aisle, her face went completely white. She swayed on her feet, her hand reaching out for something to steady herself. Richard caught her arm, but it was too late. Lily collapsed right there in the front row, her body hitting the floor with a sound that made everyone around us gasp. People rushed forward, someone called for help, and in the chaos that followed, I found myself kneeling beside my daughter, the daughter who had spent years treating me like I was worthless. "Lily," I said softly, brushing her hair back from her forehead. "Lily, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, and when they focused on my face, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Not anger, not embarrassment, but fear. Raw, genuine fear. "Mom," she whispered so quietly only I could hear. How did you have that money?" Before I could answer, the paramedics arrived, and Lily was lifted onto a stretcher. As they wheeled her out of the auditorium, I heard her saying over and over, "I don't understand. I don't understand." Tommy stayed close to me as the crowd began to disperse. "Grandma," he said, "there's so much I want to ask you." I looked down at this young man I had sacrificed so much for. This grandson who was finally seeing me clearly for the first time in his life. "There's so much I want to tell you too," I said. "But first, let's make sure your mother is okay." As we walked toward the exit, people nodded respectfully, some even approaching to shake my hand and congratulate me. For the first time in decades, I walked through a crowd feeling proud instead of invisible. But I knew this was just the beginning. Lily's fainting spell wasn't just from shock. It was from the realization that everything she thought she knew about her mother, about her family, about herself, had just been turned upside down. And I had a feeling that when she recovered, she would have many, many questions that I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. I sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, still wearing my navy dress, still clutching the crystal plaque from the ceremony. Tommy was beside me, unusually quiet, while Richard paced near the vending machines, checking his phone every few minutes. It had been 2 hours since Lily collapsed, and the doctors said she was stable but needed rest. The shock had triggered what they called a vasovagal response. Essentially, her body's reaction to overwhelming stress had caused her to faint. "Mrs. Crawford?" A young nurse appeared in the doorway. "Your daughter is awake and asking for you." I stood slowly, my knees protesting after sitting so long. Tommy started to get up too, but I placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Let me talk to her first," I said softly. "There are things we need to discuss." Richard looked up from his phone. "Joan, I think I should be there too. There are questions that need answers." I met his eyes steadily. "Yes, there are. But first, Lily and I need to talk alone." Lily's room was private, courtesy of Richard's expensive insurance. She was propped up in bed, her hair disheveled, her makeup smeared. She looked younger somehow, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. "Mom." Her voice was hoarse. "Sit down. Please." I pulled the visitor's chair close to her bed and sat down, setting my plaque on the bedside table. Lily stared at it for a long moment. $200,000, she said finally. "Where did you get $200,000? I had rehearsed this conversation in my head during the drive to the hospital, but now that the moment was here, I wasn't sure where to begin. "I sold Grandma's house," I said simply. Lily blinked. "What house?" Grandma lived in that awful little apartment downtown. No, honey. That was after Grandpa died. Before that, they owned a house on Maple Street. When Grandma passed away, she left it to me. You never told me about any house. You never asked about the estate. You were busy with your wedding plans, remember? You said you didn't want to deal with that depressing stuff. Lily's face flushed slightly. She had said exactly that, the day after my mother's funeral. But even if you sold a house, she continued, how could you afford to just give away $200,000? You work at a grocery store, Mom. You live in that tiny apartment. I took a deep breath. Because that money was never for me, Lily. It was always for Tommy. But you could have had a better life. You could have moved to a nicer place, bought a new car, traveled. I didn't want those things. I wanted Tommy to have opportunities that I never had, that you never had when you were growing up. Lily was quiet for a moment, staring at her hands. When she looked up, her eyes were filled with tears. Why didn't you tell me? All these years, I thought you were just barely getting by. I thought you couldn't help more because you didn't have anything to give. The irony wasn't lost on me. Would it have mattered if you had known? Of course it would have mattered. Would it, though? Or would you have just asked me for money directly instead of letting me give it anonymously to Tommy? Lily opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. We both knew the answer to that question. When did you start paying for his school? When he was 10. You seemed so stressed about the tuition, and I could see how important it was to you that he stay at Heritage. I thought Richard's family was helping. I thought maybe he had some kind of scholarship. I made sure the payments looked like scholarship adjustments. I didn't want you to feel obligated to me. Lily laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Obligated? God, Mom, I've treated you like you were nothing. Like you were an embarrassment. I reached over and took her hand. You were trying to build a good life for yourself and Tommy. I understood that. No, you don't understand. Lily pulled her hand away, her voice rising. I've been horrible to you. I've been ashamed of you, embarrassed by you. Yesterday, I wouldn't even let you take pictures with Tommy, because I was afraid of what people would think. Lily. And the whole time, you were the one making his education possible. You were the one sacrificing everything so he could have the best. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Richard's family never contributed a penny. They always thought Tommy wasn't quite good enough for their precious family name. This was news to me. I had assumed Richard's wealthy family had been supportive. Richard doesn't even know, Lily continued. About the tuition, I mean. I've been juggling credit cards and loans, trying to keep up with the payments I thought we were responsible for. I've been drowning financially, too proud to ask for help, and all this time. She trailed off, staring at the ceiling. All this time your mother was taking care of everything, I finished quietly. How? She asked. How did you manage it? Even with the house money, working at the grocery store. I worked 3 jobs, honey. The bakery, the store, and cleaning offices at night. Lily's face went white again. 3 jobs? For how long? 18 years. The silence stretched between us. I could see her calculating, understanding for the first time the scope of what I had done. Mom, why? Why would you do that and never say anything? I thought about how to answer that. How to explain 18 years of silent sacrifice without sounding martyred or bitter. Because I love you both, I said finally. And because I wanted Tommy to have every chance to succeed without the burden of knowing how much it cost. But I made you feel like you weren't important. I treated you like you were useless. You were protecting the life you built. I understood that too. Stop making excuses for me. Lily's voice cracked. I was cruel to you, Mom. I was ashamed of my own mother who was sacrificing everything for my child. Before I could respond, there was a knock on the door. Richard entered, followed by Tommy. They both looked uncertain, as if they weren't sure they were welcome. How are you feeling? Richard asked Lily, though his eyes kept darting to me. Like I've been living in a fantasy, Lily said bitterly. Richard, did you know that my mother has been paying Tommy's tuition for 8 years? Richard stopped short. What? That's impossible. Your mother works at a grocery store, yes. Along with 2 other jobs that I never bothered to ask about. Lily's voice was sharp with self-recrimination. Tommy came around to the other side of the bed. Grandma, is it true? About the 3 jobs. I nodded. It was worth it, sweetheart. Every early morning, every late night. But Grandma, we could have gone to public school. We could have found another way. You deserved the best education possible. And you earned every grade, every achievement. The money just opened the door. You did all the hard work. Richard was still processing. Joan, I had no idea. If I had known you were struggling to help. I wasn't struggling, I interrupted. I was choosing. There's a difference. He looked confused, and I realized he was probably one of those people who couldn't understand why someone would choose a smaller life in service of someone else's dreams. The point is, Lily said, her voice weak but determined, we all need to understand something. Everything good about Tommy's education, everything that got him into Stanford next year, it's because of Grandma Joan. Tommy sat down on the edge of the bed. Grandma, I don't know what to say. Thank you seems so small. You don't need to say anything. Just make the most of the opportunities you have. But as I looked around the room at my family, at Richard's bewildered expression, at Tommy's newfound respect, at Lily's tear-stained face, I realized that this conversation was far from over. There were still secrets I hadn't shared, decisions I had made that would shock them even more. And I had the feeling that before this day was over, everything between us would change forever. 3 days after the hospital visit, Lily called me for the first time in months without needing something. Her voice was different, softer, uncertain in a way I hadn't heard since she was a child. Mom, could you come over for dinner tonight? There are things we need to discuss as a family. I almost said no. For years, dinner invitations from Lily came with strings attached, babysitting requests, awkward social situations where I was expected to stay quiet and invisible, or worse, lectures about how I should improve my appearance or lifestyle. But something in her tone made me agree. The house looked the same as always when I arrived, immaculately maintained, expensively decorated, a testament to Richard's success and Lily's refined taste. But the atmosphere felt different, heavier somehow. Tommy answered the door, and his greeting was warmer than it had been in years. Hi, Grandma. I'm really glad you came. In the living room, Richard stood when I entered, something he had never done before. The small gesture surprised me. Joan, he said formally, I owe you an apology. I sat down in the chair he indicated, the same chair I had occupied during countless uncomfortable family gatherings. That's not necessary, Richard. Yes, it is. He remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back like he was giving a business presentation. I've spent 5 years thinking you were. Well, that you were just getting by. I never offered to help because I assumed you were too proud to accept it. I was too proud, I said honestly. But not in the way you think. Lily emerged from the kitchen, carrying a tray of coffee. She moved carefully, still pale from her hospital stay, but her eyes were clearer than I had seen them in years. Mom, she said, setting the tray down, Richard and I have been talking. About everything. About how we've treated you, about the assumptions we made. She sat down across from me, her hands twisted in her lap. I need to tell you some things. Things I'm not proud of. I waited, sensing that whatever came next would be difficult for her to say. When I married Richard, I lied about our background. I told his family that you were a retired teacher, that Dad had left us well provided for when he died. This wasn't news to me, but I let her continue. I was so ashamed of how we really lived when I was growing up. The apartment, the tight budgets, the way you worked so hard just to keep us afloat. I wanted Richard's family to think I came from the same kind of background they did. Richard sat down heavily. I believed it all. I thought Joan was just modest about her past success. And when Tommy started school here, Lily continued, I let everyone believe that Richard was paying the tuition. I even told some of the other mothers that you had a small trust fund that helped occasionally. The betrayal stung, even though I had suspected something like this. Why are you telling me this now? Because I realized that I've been living a lie for so long that I started believing it myself. Lily's voice cracked. I convinced myself that you really hadn't contributed much to our lives. It was easier than admitting that everything I had was built on your sacrifice. Tommy had been quiet through this exchange, but now he spoke up. Mom, there's something I need to tell you too. Lily looked at him with concern. What is it, honey? I've known about Grandma's jobs for 3 years. The silence that followed was deafening. What? Lily's voice was barely a whisper. I saw her one night when Jake's dad picked me up late from basketball practice. She was leaving the medical building downtown with a cleaning cart. I asked her about it the next day. I remembered that conversation. Tommy had been 15, old enough to understand but young enough to be hurt by the knowledge. She made me promise not to tell you, Tommy continued. She said it would only upset you and that she was doing it because she wanted to, not because she had to. But Tommy, Richard said, why didn't you say something? If you knew your grandmother was working 3 jobs. Because she asked me not to. Tommy's voice was firm. And because I was afraid if Mom knew she'd make Grandma stop. And I didn't want to leave Heritage. The honesty of that statement hit the room like a physical blow. My 16-year-old grandson had kept my secret not just out of respect for my wishes, but because he was afraid of what his mother might do with the knowledge. Lily covered her face with her hands. Oh God. Tommy, you thought I would. You thought I wouldn't care about Grandma killing herself to pay for your school. I didn't know what you'd do, Tommy said quietly. But I knew you cared more about me staying at Heritage than about whether Grandma was happy. The truth of that statement hung in the air. We all knew it was accurate, even if it was painful to acknowledge. There's more, I said quietly. Everyone looked at me. Things you still don't know. Richard leaned forward. What things? I took a deep breath. The house wasn't the only thing I sold. Over the years I sold my mother's jewelry, some antique furniture. Everything of value I inherited. The money all went to Tommy's education fund. How much? Lily asked, though she looked like she dreaded the answer. Including the house, about $350,000. Richard's face went white. $350,000? Some went to tutoring, some to the special summer programs, some to the college prep courses. I wanted to make sure Tommy had every advantage. But Mom, Lily said, that was your inheritance. That was supposed to be for your retirement, your security. Tommy's future was my security. Knowing he would have opportunities was all the retirement I needed. Tommy stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his shoulders shaking. When he turned back, there were tears on his face. Grandma, I would have been fine at public school. I would have been fine without the tutoring and the extra programs. You didn't have to give up everything. I know that, sweetheart. But I wanted to give you the best possible start in life. At what cost? Lily's voice was anguished. Mom, you live in that tiny apartment, you drive that old car, you wear the same 3 dresses over and over. I thought it was because you were content with a simple life. I am content with a simple life. But you could have had more. You could have traveled, lived somewhere nice, enjoyed your golden years. I looked around the room at my family, really looked at them. Richard, whose wealth had never brought him much joy. Lily, whose pursuit of status had made her bitter and anxious. Tommy, who was just beginning to understand the weight of sacrifice. I have had more, I said firmly. I've had the satisfaction of watching Tommy grow into a remarkable young man. I've had the knowledge that my sacrifices meant something. That's worth more than a fancy apartment or a new car. But now we know, Richard said. We can help you now. You don't have to work 3 jobs anymore. I smiled, but it was sad. Richard, the damage is done. I'm 63 years old. My body is worn out from 18 years of hard labor. I can't undo that. But we can make sure you're comfortable now, Lily insisted. We can help you move somewhere nicer. Get you a better car. And then what? I become your charity case? The mother you support out of guilt. The room fell silent again. They were beginning to understand that this wasn't a problem money could solve. I don't want your guilt money, I continued. I made my choices freely and I don't regret them. But I do want something else. What? Tommy asked. I want to be treated with respect. I want to be included in family decisions that affect me. I want to stop being an embarrassment that you try to hide. Lily started crying again. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so ashamed of how I've treated you. Sorry isn't enough anymore, Lily. Sorry doesn't give me back 18 years of being made to feel worthless by my own daughter. The brutality of that statement shocked even me, but it needed to be said. What do you want from us? Richard asked quietly. I looked at each of them, these people I love despite everything. I want honesty. No more lies about who I am or what I've done. I want to be included, not hidden. And I want some say in my own future. Anything, Lily said immediately. Whatever you want. But I could see in her eyes that she still didn't fully understand. She thought this was about money, about making amends. She didn't realize that 18 years of being treated as less than had changed something fundamental in our relationship. Something that might not be fixable with good intentions and guilty apologies. The evening ended with promises and plans, but I drove home with a heavy heart. They wanted to help me now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that their concern was more about their own guilt than about my well-being. And I was beginning to realize that after so many years of giving everything, I might not have much left to give them in return. 6 months after the recognition ceremony, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment, making coffee for one. The morning light streamed through windows that were actually mine, not rented, not borrowed, but purchased with money I had saved over the past year. After our family confrontation, Lily had insisted on helping me find a better place to live. She had shown me condos in her neighborhood, apartments in upscale complexes, places that would have put me closer to their world. But I had chosen this small one-bedroom unit in a quiet complex near the community college. It was modest but comfortable, with a view of a garden instead of a parking lot. More importantly, it was peaceful. The changes hadn't happened overnight. In the weeks following our difficult conversation, Lily had tried desperately to make amends. She invited me to every family gathering, introduced me properly to her friends, even told Richard's parents the truth about my background. The reactions were mixed. Some were impressed by my dedication. Others were clearly uncomfortable with the idea that their elite social circle included someone who cleaned offices for a living. I appreciated Lily's efforts, but I could see the strain it put on her. She was trying to retrofit 18 years of lies and shame, and it wasn't working smoothly. The breaking point came at Tommy's graduation party. Lily had insisted on throwing a celebration at their house, and for the first time in years, I was included in the planning. She wanted me to feel important, valued, central to the occasion. But standing in her perfectly appointed living room, surrounded by Heritage Academy families and Richard's business associates, I felt more out of place than ever. Not because they looked down on me, many were actually quite kind once they learned my story, but because I realized I didn't want to be there at all. I didn't want to be the inspiring story of grandmother sacrifice. I didn't want to be the example of selfless love that made everyone feel better about their own family relationships. I didn't want to be Saint Joan, the martyr who gave up everything for her family. I just wanted to be myself. And I was finally beginning to remember who that was. The decision to step back wasn't dramatic. I didn't make speeches or ultimatums. I simply started saying no. No to dinners where I felt like a museum piece on display. No to family trips where I was included out of guilt rather than genuine desire for my company. No to conversations where Lily tried to convince me to let them buy me things I didn't want or need. "Mom, you're pulling away from us," Lily said during one of our weekly coffee meetings. "Just when we're trying to get closer." "I'm not pulling away," I told her. "I'm just learning to live for myself. But we want to be part of your life. You've always been part of my life, Lily. The question is whether I want to continue being part of yours." The hurt in her eyes was real, but so was my exhaustion. 18 years of being an afterthought couldn't be erased by 6 months of guilty attention. Tommy understood better than his mother did. He started visiting me alone, without the weight of family drama hanging over our conversations. We talked about his plans for Stanford, his hopes for the future, his girlfriend Sarah who made him laugh. These visits were comfortable in a way family gatherings had never been. "Grandma," he said during one of these visits, "I want you to know that I'm going to pay you back. Every penny you spent on my education." I set down my teacup and looked at this young man who had grown so much in the past year. "Tommy, that money was a gift. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything. And I want to make sure you can retire properly, maybe travel like you never got to do." "Sweetheart, I'm already retired. I quit the bakery and the cleaning job right after the ceremony. The grocery store job pays enough for my needs now, and I actually enjoy it. But don't you want more? Don't you want to see the world? Live somewhere beautiful?" I smiled at his earnestness. "I want peace, Tommy. I want quiet mornings and books I choose to read and decisions that are mine alone. I want to not worry about anyone else's happiness for a while." He was quiet for a moment. "Are you happy, Grandma?" "Really?" I considered the question. Was I happy? I was certainly different than I had been a year ago. There was less purpose in my days but also less burden. Less meaning perhaps but more freedom. "I'm content," I said finally. "That's something I haven't been in a very long time." The real test came when Lily called to tell me they were getting divorced. "Richard and I have been talking to a counselor," she explained, her voice shaky over the phone. "We realized that our whole marriage was built on false foundations. The lies about our background, the financial stress I hid from him, the way we both treated you, it poisoned everything." I listened without offering advice or comfort. This was their relationship, their decision to make. "Mom, I was wondering, could Tommy stay with you for a few weeks this summer while we sort things out? I know it's a lot to ask, but—" "No," I said quietly. The silence stretched between us. "No. Lily, I raised one child already. I've spent the last 16 years helping to raise another. I'm done being the solution to everyone else's problems." "But Mom, Tommy adores you. And it would just be temporary. Tommy is 17 years old. He can spend the summer with friends or at camps or working a job. He doesn't need his grandmother to rescue him from his parents' divorce." "I don't understand. You love Tommy." "I do love Tommy. Which is why I'm not going to teach him that grandmothers exist to solve problems that parents should handle themselves." After I hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment and realized something had fundamentally shifted inside me. For the first time in decades, I had put my own needs first. And instead of guilt, I felt relief. Tommy did stay with me for a few days when the divorce proceedings got particularly ugly, but it was his choice, not his mother's assumption. We spent the time talking about real things, his fears about his parents' split, his excitement about college, his growing understanding of what adult relationships required. "Grandma," he said on his last night, "I think I understand now why you stepped back from our family. Oh, you needed to save yourself. Like on airplanes, when they tell you to put on your own oxygen mask before helping others." I smiled. My grandson was going to be just fine. A year later, I received an invitation to Tommy's college graduation. The envelope was addressed just to me, not as part of a family unit. Inside, along with the invitation, was a handwritten note. "Grandma Joan, I know you don't like big ceremonies or public recognition, but I wanted you to know that everything I've accomplished is built on the foundation you gave me. Not just the money for school, but the example of what it means to sacrifice for someone you love. I hope someday I'm half as strong as you are. Love, Tommy." I smiled and put the invitation on my refrigerator. I would go, of course, but this time I would sit wherever I wanted, wear whatever I chose, and leave whenever I felt ready. For the first time in my adult life, I belonged to myself. And that, I had discovered, was worth more than all the gratitude and recognition in the world. The evening sun slanted through my kitchen window as I finished my coffee and thought about what to make for dinner. Just for me, exactly the way I liked it. Tomorrow I might call Tommy. Or I might read the novel I had started last week. Or I might do absolutely nothing at all. The choice finally was mine.